All right, welcome with Drew Dinsick. My voice has made a Geno Smith type of comeback. Back in business, Drew. I have 3 kids under 5. They can do what they can try whatever they want to me, but I will bounce back ultimately. Today, we're going to talk about Eagles-Giants, some other divisional matchups. In a second, we're going to bring in Sam Monson from Pro Football Focus. We'll also break down the DPOY race between Micah Parsons and Nick Bosa. But first, before we bring in Sam, Drew, I want to get your thoughts on what I think is probably the most controversial line of the season. I think last year it was Brady's return to New England, and everyone thinking that the Bucs minus 6.5, minus 7 was a total lock against the Patriots. But what are your thoughts on Vikings-Lions, where the line now is Lions minus 2.5? And whatever you evaluate home field advantage as in the NFL, I haven't met a single person who values it above maximum 2 points. So whichever way you slice it, and I think it's probably closer to 1.5, 1.6 points. Whatever way you slice it, the market is saying that the Detroit Lions, who are 5-7, are better than the Minnesota Vikings, who are 10-2. Do you agree with that?
I make them almost dead neutral. So I get why we're kind of here. The interesting parts to this one for me were much more the market dynamic. This opened, non-trivial opener, with the Vikings favorite, and it's flipped across favorite. So there's been pretty heavy early influential money that's been one-sided in favor of the Lions here. There's really not any injury news that is moving this other than the addition of Jameson Williams. JMO maybe has an impact in this game, but I think the way that Goff is operating with with St. Brown and the running backs that they have, it is not, it's not like they really need that. And I don't know that he kind of fits as far as a piece to really unlock and crack the Minnesota defense. The first time these two teams played earlier this season in Minnesota, Detroit got out to a pretty solid lead, played from ahead, and let the Vikings in the back door there and ultimately win. That's characteristic of exactly what the Vikings have done all season. Like, they win ugly, they win 1-score games, and while in one hand that's not sustainable, on the other hand, the Detroit defense can be had. So with a healthy Jefferson and a healthy Cook out there, Minnesota is going to be very live in this game. The win probability shift from the early market makers was, in the ballpark of 8%, which honestly is unheard of this time of season. Usually without a key injury to the quarterback position, you're not going to see that type of shift in terms of a single game win probability, because we know so much about these teams and the prices are really well defined. So I would guess this probably closes at pick'em. I think there's going to be some buyback here on the Vikings. But to kind of go in and answer the beginning, your first question, I have very, very narrow margin between these two teams.
Yes, I think the 2 ways to look at it are, one, there is the thought that both of these defenses are bad and they're pretty close to being equally bad. And then on offense, when Detroit have been healthy, when they've had their receivers, when they've had their offensive line keeping Goff clean, and Goff has always been very solid when kept clean, that the Detroit offense has actually been more efficient than Minnesota's offense. And I think the thing is that Kirk Cousins just hasn't played that well this year, which is the sneaky thing about Minnesota. And then lastly, Detroit are 2-5 in 1-score games. Minnesota are 9-0 in 1-score games. If Minnesota had just gone 5-4 and Detroit had gone 4-3, then the Lions would have a better record than the Vikings. So I think those are the things that are informing the market. But let's bring in Sam Monson from PFF. You can follow Sam at PFF_Sam. Sam, just quickly, what are your thoughts on Vikings-Lions? Do you agree with the market that the Lions are considered the better team on neutral field right now than the Vikings?
No, not really. I think it's very close. So I kind of get why certainly the line is close rather than, reflecting the records, obviously, and having Minnesota as a big favorite, particularly, though, when you stack it up next to last week when Jacksonville was considered a pretty, a healthy enough favorite over Detroit, and then connect that to the Minnesota thing. It's even tougher to buy. I do think that, the Vikings are probably a slightly better team than the Lions. And I also think they match up reasonably well in a couple of different areas. They have Patrick Peterson playing his best season at corner for years on the defense. their defense is inconsistent, but it's capable of showing up in key moments, third downs. Zadarius Smith does his best damage rushing from an interior spot where the Lions have some weaknesses in that offensive line. So I think I like Minnesota to kind of take advantage a little bit of a couple of matchups and probably have a slight edge in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And the other thing, I agree that Minnesota are the better team. And I think the reason why is that Kirk Cousins, he should get better as the season goes on. Like, he hasn't played to his typical level, I think. And with TJ Hawkinson, that if you look at like how Justin Jefferson's routes have changed since Hawkinson has gotten there, I think that his average depth of target has gotten deeper, and I think that that should change Minnesota's offense. But let's jump into Cleveland at Cincinnati, which is one of the most interesting and kind of difficult games to wrap one's head around, just because Sean Watson is such a wild card. The Bengals are -6 in this game. The look ahead was -3.5, -4, and then after how good they looked against the Chiefs all around and how insipid Watson looked against the Texans, that line has jumped up. Sam, what do you make of this game, and how do you kind of price or project Deshaun Watson going forward?
Yeah, that part is really difficult because he looked really bad last week. I mean, there's no question that Jacoby Brissett would have been a much better option for them a week ago, but it was against the Texans. It doesn't matter. Like, who cares? Then the point is it's a long-term play. At some point, you expect Deshaun Watson to knock the rust off and overtake Jacoby Brissett in terms of what he's bringing to the table. What we don't have any idea, though, is how long that's going to take. He's basically been out of the game for 2 straight years. The idea of there being some rust there, I think, makes a ton of sense. But is that something that lasts a week? Is that something that lasts a month? I think this is sort of uncharted territory for how long it's going to take him to get up to speed and start playing like the guy we know he can play like. Almost all of his misses last week were short. He was like kind of opposite calibrated version of Cam Newton, who every time he missed would miss a yard above his receiver's head. Watson was short on pretty much everything. It feels like something that should be a pretty quick fix. That's not going to take a month for him to remember how to, throw an accurate football, but there's no guarantee that it's going to be 1 week and it's back this time.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. And I think this matchup is going to, there's going to be some pretty interesting storylines that come out of this game one way or the other, because everybody remembers the last head-to-head between these teams. It was a Monday Night Football game in prime time. I lost my shirt in that game between the props I played and getting involved with Cincinnati at halftime. It was not good. Cincinnati just got completely manhandled in that one. And if Cleveland can't put up a puncher's fight here on the road after Jacoby Brissett completely dominated this team, there's going to be some serious questions to ask about what are we doing here in Cleveland? Are we really just punting on the rest of the season and just trying to use these games as an opportunity to get Deshaun Watson some reps? I don't know that makes a ton of sense, but season's going to be over if they're not competitive in this one. The Bengals, huge leverage in this game, where a loss basically, kind of moves them clearly into a wild card and out of the running for an AFC North. But a win, they are on track here to take down or to take over the Ravens if the market is correct and the Ravens lose to the Steelers. What is your long-term outlook of this Bengals team? Do you think that they are a realistic contender in an AFC? Do they belong even in the conversation with the likes of the Chiefs and the Bills? And, do you think that there is any value in the futures market with these guys?
The Bengals schedule is fascinating. When you look at the teams, including Kansas City from a week ago, that they play on the run-in, when we make the playoffs, I don't think we're going to have a better handle on any team in the NFL than we will have on the Bengals, just because of the teams they're going to have played in the last 5-6 weeks of the season. So to start that off with a big win against Kansas City, I think is a real statement that they're a better team than they were a year ago when they made the Super Bowl, obviously overachieving to get there. But I think they have a chance to make, a sequence of sort of statements and not just steal that division from Baltimore, but really put themselves in the discussion for that number 1 seed and potentially take that from Kansas City and Buffalo and become the team that is actually the front runner in the AFC, particularly if Joe Burrow continues to play the way he's playing. Losing Jamar Chase for a couple of weeks in a funny way, I think was good for them, because they kind of discovered that they're capable of winning in a few different ways rather than just lean on Joe Burrow to Jamar Chase. They realize that the T. Higgins thing does work as a number one option, even when Jamar Chase isn't there. They just sort of discovered that they can still load up the run game and succeed that way. So I think the Bengals are one of the most dangerous teams in the NFL right now. And if they can survive the Browns, who are a team that do give them problems every time they play, like they're in a really good position to chase that, not just the division, but that number one seed.
Do you think there is something there, Sam, with the matchup? Like generally with matchup trends, I throw them out because there's too much noise. Like I don't think that Kyle Shanahan owns Sean McVay, and there's something in the coaching matchup where Sean McVay just freaks out and just cannot beat Kyle Shanahan, given that, you know, the one time they met in the playoffs, Sean McVay did win. But is there something specific in this matchup? Is it just purely a Myles Garrett thing against that offensive line?
Yeah, they've actually done a reasonable job against Myles Garrett the few times they played. Because every time I go into this game, I think, man, Myles Garrett against Jonah Williams, like that's a recipe for disaster. It's going to be the thing that determines the game. And it never does. Like every time they play, Myles Garrett's kept relatively quiet. Jonah Williams doesn't have a terrible game. They don't even do anything dramatic to kind of give him over the top help. It isn't the factor I keep expecting it to be every week. So no, I'm kind of with you. I think this probably is just noise, and I don't see an obvious reason why, you know, the Browns would do unusually well against Cincinnati.
Yeah, yep. No, I agree with all that. Can I ask you about Jags-Titans here? We got an interesting market move lately, as you see a lot of Titans money hitting the board because Doug Peterson has said no Trevor Lawrence in practice, and his status for Sunday is up in the air now. This makes it a very tough handicap. Do you have a general read on whether or not we'll see Lawrence? And if no Lawrence, if it's the CJ Beathard show, do the Jags have a puncher's chance here, or is this the Titans' opportunity to lock up the AFC South?
I mean, first of all, I couldn't believe he came back in the game last week. Like when they were showing the slow-mo replays of that knee injury, that looked like a season ender, or at least something that was going to keep him out for an extended period of time. And then all of a sudden it's like, no, the scans have been fine. Lawrence is back in the game, and not just back in the game, but like scrambling for, you know, significant yardage on first down or whatever. He looked fine. So it's kind of weird to see him all of a sudden pop back up and it be a question. But I can buy that from seeing experience of sort of guys that have been able to play through knee injuries. And then once it swells up or flares up later in the day, that's when it becomes an issue. And actually playing on during the injury maybe exacerbated the whole thing and made it a bit worse. So it definitely wouldn't shock me if Trevor Lawrence was missing from seeing that injury and seeing what it was at the time. If he is down, I would say like this is Tennessee's opportunity to get back on track and, you know, really look good against the Jacksonville team that's kind of been losing its way lately, even with Trevor Lawrence looking like he might have turned a corner.
Yeah, on that, like, firstly, seeing that injury in real time, I would have priced the over-under for when Trevor Lawrence next sees the NFL field as 2024, because it seemed like getting injured this late in the season with how that looked. But the thing with the Jags, Sam, is there anything the Jags do well? Is there any kind of area that they're above average in? Because I can't locate it.
They actually have a pretty good pass blocking grade. That's I do the offensive line rankings at PFF every week, and they're one of the most one-dimensional lines in the NFL. They're terrible at run blocking and pretty good at pass blocking. That's about it, though.
Yeah, you could ask the same about the Titans, though. I think what do they do well?
One defense, and that's
fair.
about it.
That's fair.
Yeah, okay.
That's fair.
Let's move off that game because there's not too much going on in Jags-Titans. Eagles at Giants. The Eagles are 7-point favorites there in New Jersey. The line opened 6.5, quickly moved up to 7. The total's 44.5. Sam, is there any hope for the New York Giants? I think the book is kind of out on them that they were getting unsustainably lucky in close games against bad teams. And the Eagles right now, do you think that they're the clear best team in the NFC, or do you think it's kind of bunched with the Cowboys?
I think they're the clear best, and certainly I think they're the team that has the easiest ceiling to hit. You know, when they play well, I don't think there's anybody else that can live with them. They're too complete. They can win in too many different ways. Dallas Goedert, I thought the injury to him might have caused them some problems, and they seem to have adjusted to not having that kind of third option in the offense. They figured out ways around that. So at that point, I think they're too much better than anybody else. Dallas definitely has the ability to rival them and get in that kind of ballpark. But I think it's so much driven off that defense right now that if you come up against a team like Philadelphia, for example, with a good offensive line that actually has a shot at slowing down that pass rush, I don't think Dallas has as many plan B, plan C the way that Philadelphia does. As for the Giants, it's like the only way they have a shot in this game, I think, is to, dial up the blitzes the way Wink Martindale does and kind of get lucky on a couple of key times, force a turnover, overload a protection, do that kind of thing, and just get a couple of plays that aren't really in the game script and flip things that way.
Yeah, this is a weird one too, because it feels like to a degree 7's not a big enough number. But at the same time, a divisional matchup like this and the familiarity, should at least in some way, shape, or form, help keep this game competitive. Interesting also kind of narrative wise, Philly played the perfect game last week. Like they were absolutely superlative. Hurts was completely, in the zone. And it's tough for teams, even, who are having great success, who have, 2-game lead now in the division, getting up for a game like this when, you've done it so many weeks in a row becomes challenging. New York is a tough place to play. Like, I think you're going to have to find some sort of X factor to bet this one either way. And I'm inclined to take the points with the Giants here just because they are divisional dogs. And, to a degree, they are getting healthier, particularly on the offensive line and in the secondary. So maybe we get a competitive one here. Maybe it's a low scoring affair. We have a total that's 44.5, which feels high for a Giants game, frankly. I think, I'm hopeful we get an entertaining one here. Jay, are you going to play Giants +7, or are you well off this one?
I would steer clear of Giants +7. I might skew Eagles if forced, but I think the line is right. I would have bet Eagles -6.5. That was the line, I think, to get on. I think Sam raised a good point around like the Giants, they're blitzing. It does give them more variance week to week just because of, the individual plays that it can trigger. I think if they were a more conservative defense, I'd like them less in this matchup. And then just quickly on the Eagles vis-a-vis the Cowboys, I think a way to think about how you stack up those teams is I think the Eagles are better at every single positional group outside of edge rusher and running back, and then quarterback I think is probably a wash at this point between Hurts and Dak. I think Hurts probably has a better context, but if you're making the case for the Cowboys over the Eagles, I think that would be just the one refrain that the Eagles they're just more complete. They have more depth and more, I think, high-end talent across the board. But before we get into DPOY and O'Roy, just a reminder, if you don't have the NBC Sports Predictor app, go download it now. The contests are free and easy to play. You have a shot to win $100,000 this weekend by guessing the outcome between the Dolphins and Chargers in our Sunday Night 7 contest. All right, before we let you go, Sam, I want to get your thoughts on a couple of awards. Start off with Defensive Player of the Year, which is always a very subjective award and kind of fraught with peril, but Micah Parsons has been the heavy favorite for a long time. He's kind of been anointed. He's definitely the people's choice, especially after he narrowly lost last year. He is a heavy -375 favorite on PointsBet. And then Nick Bosa is the challenger. Do you have a lean head-to-head between these two? Do you think it's just kind of done and Parsons is the guy, or do you think that Bosa has a legitimate shot?
Yeah, I do think it's kind of been Micah Parsons, from the outset, the first couple of weeks when it became clear that they were just going to make him an edge rusher, turn him loose and let that do what it does. I think it's probably been kind of his to lose at that point. The other interesting thing about Parsons is he does not come out of games. Like they are winning by blowout scores, and Parsons is still in there late in the fourth quarter trying to rack up some more, Defensive Player of the Year points and stats and plays. So I think they're going to kind of help him win this award, and it's going to take something pretty special from Bosa down the stretch to take that away from him.
Yeah. I think with Bosa that for him to win, he needs to lap Parsons, because if it's close, then it's just going to go to Parsons. So Bosa probably needs to get to 22.5 sacks and tie the sack record to win, I think, which he's only 8 sacks away in 5 games, so maybe that's in play. But Drew, do you think there's any value on Bosa at this point?
Yeah, I do, and in particular because if it's if people are remembering sort of the high-profile plays that Bosa had like last week, and kind of down the stretch, and the Niners win their division and get a higher seed than the Cowboys, people will kind of use that as a tiebreaker, I think.
And the fact, Jimmy G injury, the fact that all of a sudden, like, the defense is going to be given credit for carrying this team down the stretch if it happens, and that will be Nick Bosa.
Yeah, and there's a lot of other players on the Cowboys defense that I don't love. And if the defense itself just kind of slides statistically, and just, and that's going to be tough considering they play the Texans, the Jags, and the Titans and the Commanders coming down the home stretch here. But let's just say, for hypothetical purposes, that the defense overall kind of slides more into the top 10 range instead of the top 2 range. I could see people making the case for Bosa, but plus 140. People who are long-term listeners of the show know that there were much better prices available earlier this season that you should already have in pocket. So I don't think I would bet plus 140.
No, I wouldn't bet plus 140 either. If you can get plus 250, though, I think that's probably a bet. I think he's about plus 250 to tie or break the sack record at that point. And at that point, he probably just wins. Let's talk about offensive rookie of the year to close out. Ken Walker is still the favorite at plus 175. I don't agree with that. Garrett Wilson is plus 250 and the second favorite. Also don't agree with that for the other reason. And then Christian Watson is third, plus 375. I'd need 20-1 to back him. Then it's Olave, Robinson, Pickett. Sam, my read on this market is that Garrett Wilson should be the favorite because basically when Zach Wilson hasn't been his quarterback, Garrett Wilson is averaging over 11 targets per game. He's 94 yards a game, 4 touchdowns in 5 games. He had 15 targets last week against the Vikings, 8 for 162 and left an 80-yard touchdown bomb on the table. Do you agree that Garrett Wilson should be favored, or do you think there's another guy who can emerge?
Yeah, it's tough because the two guys I think that should be favorites if they'd had a sort of full season of all things being equal would be Garrett Wilson and Christian Watson. Watson's numbers have obviously exploded and all the crazy touchdowns, but Watson missed a bunch of time. He didn't play well earlier in the season. And as you said, Garrett Wilson was just hamstrung by having Zach Wilson as his quarterback. Like, if you extrapolate his numbers out over 17 games, he basically has the same season as Jamar Chase did a year ago. And we're talking about one of the greatest rookie seasons ever. That's the kind of pace Zach Wilson is on, not just with Mike White, but with Flacco as well. Like, just anybody that isn't Zach Wilson, he's putting up those kind of numbers. So I think he's probably performing the best of all the rookies. And if he has enough down the stretch, if there's enough games with Mike White at quarterback, and of course, if Mike White doesn't turn into a pumpkin, then I think he probably should be the favorite.
I think there's some potential of pumpkin Mike White even helping him because they would be in negative game states where they got to air it out regardless. True. He can still rack up yardage. I think Garrett Wilson is probably going to finish in the top 10 across all receivers in the NFL in terms of yardage this year, which is truly amazing. He is the bet as laid out very eloquently, I think, by Jay. Let's. I mean, of all of the awards, Jay, is there a better bet to be made right now than Garrett Wilson, Rookie of the Year?
No, I think that's the best one. Honestly, like Geno Smith, minus 700, comeback player of the year. I feel like that should be minus 20,000. I think that's just done. And Sam, I remember one of your tweets where you mentioned it is a weird thing with Geno where it's like, what's he coming back from? Right. But my thing there is like, he's coming back from the dead. He's coming back from total irrelevance, and now he's among the living, and he's thriving. So, and I think the people have just made their minds up that he is eligible for the award, and thus he probably just wins. But yeah, I think Garrett Wilson is the best bet on the board. I think America has just decided that Chris Olave and Dameon Pierce are ineligible for this award because of their teams. There's just too much of a stench. So I think Garrett Wilson plus 250 is a great bet. I think it should be more like plus 130. And the Jets, people just want to reward the Jets at this point. And I think that just the vibes around that team, the fact that they're 7-5, even in their losses, like against the Vikings, still feels like they're creating positive momentum for these types of awards. So,
and they're in New York.
And they're in New York, which always helps. Sam, thank you so much for joining us. Can you let us know where to find your content?
Yeah, pff.com, the PFF app, and me on Twitter there under PFF_Sam.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Sam, for your time, and look forward to having you on again soon. All right. Before we get into the World Cup, download the RotoWorld app to receive breaking player news all season long. Stay ahead of the competition by favoriting players on your roster. Get the latest injury updates, player news, and much more delivered right to your phone. It's available in the App Store today. All right, Drew, little soccer ball talk to close out. Pivot to the round ball, even though there's no games on at the moment. But, what's your read on the quarterfinals? Any prices, any games that you're particularly honing in on?
Well, I mean, we have 3 lopsided to qualifiers here: Argentina, Brazil, and Portugal. The market is basically telling you those 3 teams are going through. I don't have huge objection to those because, pretty clearly the Netherlands, Croatia, and Netherlands, Croatia, and Morocco are, they're a little bit lucky to be here. All that said, the quarterfinals of this tournament to me look a lot more competitive than the knockout round of 16. This is going to probably be more opportunities for shootouts. We only had 2 of the 8 games in the round of 16 get to shootouts. I think realistically you could see 2 of these 4 get to shootouts, and the prices don't really reflect how just in general, like how closely contested these could end up becoming. So I think I'm going to take a number of these looks to advance via penalty kicks. Now, what's kind of cool is even when you have a mismatch between teams like the Netherlands and Argentina, if they get to penalty kicks, there's not going to be just a huge difference in price in terms of who wins those penalty kicks. So you can take the long shot like Netherlands to advance via penalty kicks, and then potentially get a better price on just Argentina to advance if we get to extra time or something like that. So there's going to be some interesting and kind of fun in-game trading ways if you're going to watch these matches, if you're going to get involved in the to advance market. But as I look at everything, the method of advancing price for advancing via penalty kicks looks like the angle of attack in a lot of these matches that are expected to be lopsided. France, England, I know you have an opinion. I can't make much sense of that one. Where are you leaning there?
Yeah, I think to me, my biggest lean, I guess, is that France, England, and Netherlands, Argentina are both going to be ugly, low-scoring games where I think that Southgate has shown time and time again that he's going to be defensive. He's probably going to revert back to playing 3 at the back, which is effectively for him 5 at the back, and bring in Kieran Trippier to defend or help Kyle Walker defend, move Kyle Walker into right centre back, and just go ultra defensive to kind of contain Mbappe and then try and score 1 on the break. And then Argentina, Netherlands. The Netherlands, they're just very well organized defensively. And Argentina, I think the perception of Argentina, because they have Messi and Di Maria, is that they're this kind of finesse team. No, Argentina are really tough, and they're very, very good defensively. I think that's going to be a very, very chippy game, and one that perhaps goes the distance as well. My best bet on the board, and it kills me because I'm already on this, and it feels like it's gotten longer, but I still think it's actually got shorter and is even more of a bet now. But Messi is plus 400 to win the Golden Ball. Mbappe is plus 125. I just can't have it because if you just multiply England's price to advance and Argentina's price to advance, then that's a lot shorter than plus 400. And then at that point, I think Messi is extremely short to win. I don't think Mbappe can win the Golden Ball if he doesn't make the semi-final. I don't think there's any precedent for that. Mbappe has to win. I think if Mbappe beats England, then he's probably just going to win without reaching the final. But I do think that Messi plus 400, I still think there is some meat on the bone there. But I'm not going to back it because I'm already heavily invested in Lionel. But what's your read on Golden Ball, where Mbappe's plus 125, as you can see on screen, Messi plus 400, and then 3 of the Brazilians, Neymar, Vinicius, and Richarlison, all 16-1, with Bruno Fernandes and Jude Bellingham.
Yeah, I mean, it's a sentimental award in a lot of ways. Mbappe is almost certainly going to get the Golden Boot. There could be some incentive there for the voters then to reward someone else for most outstanding player. And, just in general, if Argentina, basically just if Argentina gets into the mix, gets into the final, then I think Messi's probably your guy. But, it feels very much like we're on a collision course here for Brazil, France. And if that is your final, I mean, I really just don't know how you don't give it to Mbappe. He's been too freaking good.
Win in that situation, yeah. If Mbappe makes the final, he almost can't lose the award. Yeah. So I think, honestly, Mbappe is probably a bet at plus 125, and I think Messi is a bet at plus 400, because to me, what shapes this market is that the Brazilians, like, who are the favorites to win the tournament, I don't think anyone from Brazil is winning this award because Neymar got injured and missed 2 games and hasn't been as prolific. So I don't think they're going to give it to Vinicius or Richarlison, and they're probably not going to give it to Neymar missing time. So I think you just back Mbappe and Messi. You hope one of them reaches the final, in which case it's pretty much automatic one of them will win. And then there's also a good chance that one of them can win it, having gone out in the semi. So that would be my look there.
That's a fun angle of attack. I hadn't really even thought of that, but this does feel like a 2-man award. Vinny Jr., he's been good, but not consistent enough, I don't think. And you're asking a lot for him to raise his level beyond what we've already seen in this one. So I think that's the right strategy.
Yep. Okay, before we go, last question for you, Drew, on the NBA from a viewer.
Oh gosh,
tonight, Mr.
I have a lot. I bet a lot in the NBA tonight. And what's weird is I've been playing the NBA pretty lightly all season, and I've been losing. October and November were both losing months. December so far, I am break even. But I like in no particular order, I like the Orlando Magic getting 7 against the Clippers. I laid the 9 with the Toronto Raptors against the Lakers. Getting a very good belly laugh out of everyone kind of talking themselves into the Lakers being back, given that they're like the 11th seed in the West. People are talking about them like they're all of a sudden in the mix for a championship. I find that hilarious. I laid the 4.5 with the Minnesota Timberwolves. I don't know how much more money I can lose on that team, but I'm trying. I took the 7 points with the Sacramento Kings against the Bucks. And there's one more that I'm missing. Oh, I laid the 7.5 with Utah against the no Golden State Warriors.
Yep. My favorite one there, and I hate to say it, and I hate to even say this team's name aloud because they're at Voldemort level now, but I like the Timberwolves minus 4.5. Tyrese Halliburton questionable for that game. I think that I can't talk positive about the Timberwolves, but I do think their team kind of makes a bit more sense without Karl Towns. Like him being out definitely hurts, but I don't think it hurts as much perhaps as the market is saying, because you should be getting a better version of Gobert when they're just playing drop all the time and they actually know what they're doing. All right. Good show today, Drew. Don't forget to check out NBCSportsEdge.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks everyone watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to subscribe and rate us. From Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick, we'll see you soon.